So we'll welcome everyone. Thank you again. As we said, Betsy and I work at the Department of Education, and our passion is truly working with infants, toddlers, and preschoolers that have delays and challenges, and we're here to just share our experiences with you as well as you sharing your experiences with us. So, and our information, our contact information is, we have handouts for you. Hopefully the presentation is a PowerPoint presentation, and so we have handouts for you that will guide us through the presentation, as well as there's some other resources that we'll go through from a family toolkit in regards to transitions. So we'll go ahead and get started. But today's topic, again, is really helping better understand, have conversations about that transition from early intervention, from early access. Some people refer to it as early intervention, others early access. But those services for children and families birth to 3 to those services for children and families when they're turning 3, at that transition point to preschool. So we'll be talking about transition, but then also we'll be talking about that context of special education and what those services are like in preschool, with the background of our Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, what that says, and what is an individualized education program, and how's that different maybe than an individualized family service plan that you've been working on, and how does that program look, function, work. And then we'll be talking about some specific special education services that would be a part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And questions throughout. So it's not that, please don't hold your question. If you have a comment or a question or clarification, please just insert in those comments throughout, okay? So the first thing we wanted to share with you was, again, that transition to preschool. And I like to think of transition from early access to preschool is you're really moving into a new period, kind of a new event in your life. So it's something new. You're beginning. I always like to think about it as a new beginning, in a sense, because you're starting to leave something that has maybe been a part of your life for potentially up to 3 years. And so, you know, depending on when you started in early access services, you may have had that service provider or that team of people coming into your home or working with you from the time your baby came home from the hospital. So it's ending kind of that time period in your life and transitioning into another new beginning for you. And so that time really has an opportunity for everyone to kind of work together to prepare for that, because you as family members have to prepare for that, and I'll tell you, as early interventionists, we have to prepare for that as well, because we've been with you as long as you've been with us. So there is some of that relationship. So early access services, based on what we know in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the IDEA, that those services, early access services, end when the child turns 3, okay? And they either end until when the child turns 3, or if a child has made progress and they are no longer needing early access services and they've met all of their outcomes and they do not need that service, then obviously those services then are discontinued at that time. But specifically for today, we're going to really talk about that kind of reaching 3 years of age and getting ready to move to something else. And so, as I said, that planning is so important. It's just to be able to have that. In the law, it talks about a smooth and seamless transition. And I think, wow, you know, that would be for any transition. Sometimes it's bumpy along the way, and if it's not planned, then it's even more so bumpy. But hopefully we'll show you how that could potentially become more smooth for you and help you be empowered in making decisions. So early access, as you know, really the mission and the vision behind early access is to promote families to feel confident and competent and really being able to engage in activities as a family and with your children. And so it's really to enhance your capacity and to help, well, while we enhance your capacity, obviously then we're in turn helping you enhance your child's capacity to learn and grow. So with that, then, the beginning of the journey is about officially, it has to begin at least 90 days, could be up to 9 months prior to when your child turns 3. And your service coordinator will start talking about holding a transition planning meeting. And so they'll have a meeting to really talk about, okay, what's coming up? How do we start preparing for what's happening at that 3rd birthday? And then with your approval, then you start having conversations about who needs to be involved in that meeting. I like to think about the pathway as kind of, you're entering into, there's a potential to go one way and there's a potential to go a different direction. The direction that we'll talk about today is when there's some concerns that you need to continue special education services, or you need to, that early intervention service has been supportive and it's shown how that helps your child and your family grow and develop. And the team may think, you know, we suspect that we still need to continue those services. So that pathway is transitioning from early access to special education. There might be times where you feel like, you know, that's not the road I want to take. I don't really want to go that route for one reason or another. So then you might be transitioning to other community services, and that might be a different pathway you take. Okay, so there's just different pathways that it's not just everybody's going one way. So it's obviously individualized for your family and for your child. So the route that we're going to talk about today is that pathway from early access to special education. That pathway involves working together, the individualized family service planning team and that service coordinator who you've been working with to develop plans and look at services. That's kind of your conduit. That's the go-to kind of person that you really are going to hopefully have a good relationship with, feel like you can really have that conversation about, okay, what's this going to look like? And that person then will help kind of navigate and decide, okay, let's figure out who needs to come to this meeting so that we can have a beneficial conversation to be able to plan that route. So when the individualized family service plan, your team, including you always, collaborates with the special education, well, sometimes we refer to it as a child find team or an IE, individualized education planning team. They've got kind of sometimes different names. But it's somebody else from the area education agency and potentially the district that are working together to help identify children that are eligible for special education. So those two entities, two teams kind of come together to really look at the data that would help them making decisions about that route. The data sources, I just put a few up there that you may have in your folders. You may have reports. Your service coordinator might be gathering information. Those reports could be reports from a medical provider. It could be reports from your reviews along the way, from your previous individualized, your IFSP meetings that you have. It could be other professionals that are involved with your family that have reports. So it could be any of those kinds of things that might come to the table. It could be a report to say, you know, here, these are the strategies that we have worked with in your therapy and your rehabilitation, and these are working. So those kinds of things come to the table to have for people to have discussion and get to know your child and your family better. It may involve families being interviewed by teams and people that are needing that information. It could be when families, when they're doing an activity together, that somebody's observing how a child responds to an activity that they've been engaged in. So, and then the last one would be they may be conducting assessments. They may be doing assessments specifically with your child to say, okay, you know, we give him some activities. We want to see specific skill sets that he does or she does when they're observing your child's development. Okay, so that's kind of what's brought to the table. I'm going to pause just to see if there are other things. We've got one person that's been through transition, one person that's kind of getting ready to transition, and so does this sound familiar, or is this like written black words on white paper, and it's not really this way, right? And that's what I always like to think about when I was an early interventionist. Like you're always kind of thinking about the transition, even if it's 2 years away, you're just always kind of thinking about that potentially. And so, you know, we always, that, like you said, we're always really looking at what kind of goal or what kind of skill will help me or my child to do something the next step. So that, yeah, that makes sense. The 90 days is just something that's like we would look at that. Okay, so here's the pathway when you're looking at special education. Those teams get together and they talk about, you'll hear words like determining eligibility for special education. You determine what skills the child has. Then you will be asked to sign a piece of paper that says, yes, we can go ahead and evaluate for special education services. Even if it's, let's say you've been working with a speech-language pathologist or therapist. So then that is also considered special education. So you would also be through this process. That would be, anyone would need to determine eligibility for what level of service they would need. But we refer to that as eligibility determination. And so parents sign a consent for that full, what we call a full and individual educational evaluation. Things are gathered, like we talked about before. And then we meet as a team to determine, yes, you're eligible for special education, or no, we really feel like, you know, your child's progressing and they need other services. And then within that timeline, again, timelines for law is that they have to have that, when you sign consent, then they have 60 days to complete that evaluation. Once you sign the consent and give that form to them, to the team, whoever that might be, then they have those 60 days to get all of that information and get you in a meeting to discuss those findings. After that, then, and that that has to all happen prior to the child's 3rd birthday. Now, what I've told people is, parents and families, they don't want to be having an IEP meeting for a birthday party. You know, no. You don't want to be on their, you know, the day before your birthday and they've got, you know, 50 people coming in for a 3-year-old birthday party. You don't want to be spending the night before having an IEP meeting. So plan ahead, because they have other things that they have to do when the child turns 3. So again, then they have that IEP meeting. If the child's eligible, then like you said, they develop a plan that before you maybe have had family outcomes, and those turn more into what are you going to do with a child and what's the child's outcome. So we call those then goals. Okay. Oh, wait, I got to turn this over to Betsy.
Okay, so I'm going to talk now a little bit more about what the preschool program is going to look like. So Dee talked about that transition. Your child's now turning 3. You're getting ready to go into a preschool type setting. This is just a review of what IDEA is. Again, it's that Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's the federal law that ensures that all children with disabilities are receiving the free appropriate public education. So sometimes you hear FAPE a lot, especially once you enter into special education. It's that free appropriate public education that is the guarantee under the law. And an IDEA applies from birth to age 21. So again, what happens at age 3, if you were in early access and receiving those interventions, that was mostly you were working with the AEAs, the area education agencies. They were the ones who were working with you and coming into your home and doing those services. At the age of 3, that responsibility now shifts from the AEA to the school district, okay? And so, oh, that's true. You were working with Des Moines. Thank you. The exception as far as the birth to 3 piece, you were working with Des Moines School District. They have their own SLPs, OTs that do the birth to 3. And the rest of the state, it's the AEAs who do it. So thank you. Des Moines is a little bit different. But at age 3, all children are shifting over to the school district's responsibilities. Now the AEA will still be involved. Their responsibility now is going to be more of the support services, so the speech, the occupational therapists, the physical therapists most likely are going to come from the AEA. There are other, Des Moines has their own, I'm trying to think if there's any other school districts that employ their own, just Des Moines. Okay. So you'll still primarily be working with Des Moines. If you're in other districts, the AEA and the district together are going to come together to provide all those services. The district, yes. Okay.
So, the therapists are at school.
Yes, they're going to come to the school. Exactly. Yep. Exactly. It now shifts over to the school. Nope, that's okay. And we're going to get more into that, to what does that look like? What does speech look like? All of that, because it's going to be a big change. They're not coming into your home anymore. It's all going to be based in the school setting. Right. If you continue to do that, yeah, that's you. Okay. So at age 3, those special education services now become the responsibility of the public schools, and that's we call that Part B. If you ever hear about Part C, Part B, Part C, it's under IDA. It's how they have the law laid out. But if you ever hear Part B, they're talking about age 3 up to 21. So 3 is kind of the beginning of that, and this process is pretty similar all the way through until they graduate. Okay, and again, Dee talked about this already, but if you have a child who's in early intervention, birth to 3, they're not guaranteed to receive the special education services. They have to be evaluated again. So that was she was talking about, how you sign the consent to go ahead and evaluate my child. They do that. They have 60 days to do that, and then you convene the team together to decide if they're eligible. And I was going to, yep, thank you, thank you. And you did bring up a really good point. Sometimes that we have families who think that just because their child may have a medical diagnosis, maybe they have autism. The doctor said, my child has autism, so that means, exactly, they must get special education services. When the child turns 3, that whole determination changes. They have to do an evaluation to see if they need special education services, because not all children do. A diagnosis of some type of disability does not automatically mean that you need special education. So that's the process they're going to go through to see if you need it. And it's, yep, go ahead. It's not a one and done. So let's say Eleanor wasn't found eligible, and then 6 months later, you're like, oh, now she's regressing. They can go back through that process again at any time from 3 to age 21. So it's not a, if they find do the evaluation and they find that the child's not eligible, that doesn't mean you're never ever going to get the services. You can go through that process again if needed. So good, something good to know in the future if they say, your child's no longer eligible and then they start to regress or start to have problems again, bring them back in. Let's check again and see, because they may be. Did you want to add something? You can. I mean, yeah, yeah.
What's the difference in eligibility for early access?
I'll stand next to you.
Okay, so early access's definition for why you get services would be what we refer to as a developmental delay, or a known condition that would be a result of or could lead to a developmental delay. So that is birth to 3 definition. So your 25% delay in any one area of development. And that would be, okay, you're in, get services. Or I have a chromosomal, or I was premature, especially, you said 28 weeks, definite in. So there's certain things that are broader definitions in early access. So then in special education for 3 to 21, the definition and the determination of eligibility means it changes to if you're an eligible individual, that's what you'll start to hear, eligible individual, or EI, sometimes they shorten it to EI, which to me is early intervention.
Yeah, wrong EI. There's so many acronyms. Oh.
To me, it's like, what? So what that is they're determining the discrepancy or the delay, the comparison of how your child functions in comparison to what would we expect, so the discrepancy. And then they look at progress, and if there's a discrepancy and there's a limited progress, and the progress is so loose to me with a 3-year-old, very loose to me. So discrepancy plus progress equals need, is what you'll hear. The need of the eligible individual. Right. So what I have been really encouraging families and early intervention providers is to say specifically, okay, we've made progress, but look at the resources that we have had to incorporate to make that progress. And so that's the conversation. Yes, I've made lots of progress. We're working, we're doing this, and this to make sure that Eleanor or whomever makes the progress. So bring that into the fold, bring that into that conversation to say, yeah, there maybe isn't as big of a discrepancy. Here's why. They need those services in order to continue to keep that gap going narrower and narrower. So that helps, I think, for me to be able to say, okay, there's a little bit of a difference in the way they approach that eligibility.
Yep. All right, you don't want to change it for me? Thanks. Any other questions about that process of determining? Yep. That is just the law. IDEA that we just talked about is the federal law. So it's what the federal government has said. At age 3 is when that special education starts. So, yeah. It's a good question. It is, yep. But once your child is determined eligible, so we're going to go down that path, and that's what we're going to talk about. This is when you will have a team come together to write the IEP. So in birth to 3, you had IFSP. Now it's IEP, Individualized Education Program. And you're going to have a team similar to what you have in early intervention. And this has a list of just some of who the IEP team includes. Parents, obviously, will always be a part of the IEP team. You're going to have a general education teacher and a special education teacher. That could be the same person. But you have to have someone at the team who can speak to what would a general education preschool setting look like and what would a special education setting type services look like, so that someone has the knowledge of both sides of that, okay? Again, that could be the same person, because in Iowa we have teachers who are licensed to do both, okay? So, and then you need to have someone from the school district. And we say a qualified representative. What that means is someone from the district who can commit the resources that you're going to be talking about. Transportation, where the child's going to go. You don't want somebody who has to go back and, well, I got to check with the superintendent, I'm not sure. No, you want someone there who can say, this is what we're going to provide and our school district will do it. So typically that can be a principal. Sometimes they will have a designee. If it's a large school and the principal can't get to every single meeting, sometimes they designate this person can come, and they'll be the representative, and whatever they say that we're committing to in this IEP, we will commit to, okay? So that's what that representative is. And then you'll have other individuals as appropriate. So if you suspect that the child may get speech services, then you want the SLP there. If you suspect they're going to get occupational therapy, you want the OT there. If the family wants to invite people to the IEP team meeting, you can do that as well. Anybody that you feel has knowledge that's useful for the team to know, you can invite. Like I have my exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You may need a room this big for your IEP team meeting. So, yeah. Yes, so the family can invite people, the district can invite people, the district needs to let you know who they're inviting and who's going to be coming. And then as a courtesy, you would want to do the same for the district as well. Okay, did you have a question?
I was just going to say, so this is where someone from the past would...
Yep, yeah. Absolutely. So a prior written notice it's actually it's a document that is used to let you know or the team members know decisions that are being made. So for example, if like the eligibility determination, I'm trying to think of a good example, they would give you a prior written notice saying that yes, we found your child eligible, no we didn't, and here's why. So that you can have the conversation at any point. You have a right as a parent to call an IEP meeting at any point. What they may say to you at the IEP meeting is enough time hasn't gone by for us to know if the intervention is working. So know that that may be what you talk about at the IEP meeting, but you always have the right to call an IEP meeting. It doesn't mean every time you have a concern or question that's what you should do. You could just talk to the teacher and find out. But if it's something that you're like, I want the whole team there, then you can do that at any time, okay? Okay, so this is what that will be part of your IEP meeting and what will be on the IEP. So one of the main things you'll do to start is talk about your child's present level of performance. What is your child doing now? What are his or her strengths and interests? What are the things that she's learned maybe in an early intervention? So that's just kind of, you'll start with that, all of the strengths and the things that your child is doing, and then you'll move to things that they now need to work on. So that's what we call our annual goals. And children will have anywhere from 1 to 5, 6, 7, it just depends. But you'll have goals that will be very clear and spelled out on what they will be working with your child on and how they're going to monitor that. How are they going to make sure that your child's making progress? So that will be part of the IEP team discussion as well. You're going to talk about what are the supports that your child needs? What's the instruction going to look like? What are some of the related services? And I'm going to go a little bit more into what those could be. And then you're going to talk about some other considerations, accommodations, modifications, supplementary aids, maybe assistive technology, all of these pieces that are going to go into the IEP and create the whole program around your child. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. You're going to have a beginning date. When does this IEP start? Okay, and usually it runs for a year. And within that, you're going to know exactly who is providing what services, how often are they going to be providing them, and what is that going to look like. So if you have a speech person, it's kind of similar in birth to 3. They're going to come 30 minutes a week. They're going to do it in the school setting. This is what it's going to look like. So that's all going to be spelled out in the IEP. And then the last thing that one of the last things they're going to talk about is the placement. So where is your child going to go? And this is always the biggest question and one of the things that can create some tension between teams. And I think I go into that a little bit more in the next one. So this is one of the biggest questions we often get to is where will my preschool child receive their services? So we have something once they turn 3 that you'll hear a lot. It's called LRE, Least Restrictive Environment. And that is part of the law. And the law states that children with disabilities must receive their services with children who do not have a disability to the maximum extent possible. So sometimes we call it inclusion. Mainstreaming was a term that used to be used a lot. It's this idea that if a child has a disability, it does not mean they get pulled out of a setting with all of their other peers and put over here. We want them in with their peers as much as possible. Okay, you always start in the least restrictive, the environment that they would be in. If they had a disability, if they didn't have a disability, if this was their neighborhood school, this is where children go. That's where you start. And then you talk about, okay, maybe that's not going to be appropriate enough, so then we work back to some other options. Okay, this is determined by the IEP team. The district does not get to say, this is where your child goes. No, the team gets to talk about what the setting needs to look like. And we get some confusion between setting and location, okay? The IEP team may say, you know what, my child does a really nice job. He's been in preschool already. He does a really nice job there. We don't need to pull him out. He needs to be in a similar type of setting where he's with all of his peers. We don't need to pull him out and into this other classroom. He can be in that type of setting like a Head Start or maybe he's been in a daycare and been very successful. That's the setting. The location is up to the district. So if the district has a preschool at their school, the district says, okay, we're going to provide that type of setting in our school in this preschool. Okay? So there's a difference between setting and location, and that gets really, really confusing. They do need to try to have it as close to your child's home as possible. So if there's a preschool in your neighborhood school where that would be appropriate, then that can be the setting. They want to try to keep it in your neighborhood school. Some districts only have one classroom, and that's, but there are always other ways to examine that. There's a lot of things that go into that consideration of where the setting can be. Do you want to go to the next one? For one thing, the teacher has to be a licensed teacher. So sometimes we get questions from parents, well, my child goes to this private daycare, and it's a really nice setting, and he's been there since, he was 6 weeks old. Why can't he stay there? Most likely the private daycare setting doesn't have a licensed teacher. So that's one thing, that wherever your child goes needs to have that appropriately licensed teacher. So a teacher who has early childhood education and special education license. Okay, so that's one of the things to think about. Another consideration that is kind of unique to Iowa, and we have said that we want all of our preschool children to be going to settings that are high quality, okay, whether they have an IEP or not. Now, the DE can only control the kids that we can kind of oversee, which includes children on IEPs. So we really want them to be in high quality settings. How do you know if a setting is high quality? Well, we have determined that by 3 different types of standards. One is Head Start. We have said if it's a Head Start program, we know they're being monitored, we know they're following certain standards and guidelines, that's a high quality setting. Another one is NACE accreditation, if you've ever heard of that. NACE is the National Association for the Education of Young Children. It's our National Early Childhood Association. They actually accredit programs, so they'll come out and monitor and visit programs to make sure they're meeting standards. There aren't a lot in Iowa who have that accreditation. It's tough. It's expensive. So some programs choose to do it, but not all. But that's another one where we say, okay, if the center or the private daycare is following NACE accreditation, that's a high quality setting. And then the third one is we have adopted our own standards, and those are called the Iowa Quality Preschool Program Standards. And I put the acronym up there, IQPPS. And it's something that we at the Department of Education monitor. So we have those standards not just for early childhood special education, but for our statewide voluntary preschool. If you've ever heard of the 4-year-old preschool that we provide for all 4-year-olds, they have to follow those standards. So that's the third option for programs. So if the private daycare that the family really loves isn't doing one of those 3, it cannot be a setting for their special education services. Does that? For which one? Head Starts annually, I believe. NACE has a visit every 5 years, but they monitor it annually. We do, right now our cycle is changing, but annually pieces of that are being reviewed. Yeah. Okay. So knowing that the teacher needs to be licensed and the setting has to be high quality, there is still some flexibility then that your child does not have to go to a district preschool program if there are other options, and that's something you need to talk with at your IEP team meeting about. So we often have families who come to us and say that the district's not open to, they can't do it anywhere else. They can, but it's still going to be up to the district to decide where your child's going to receive their services, okay? Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the kinds of services, and thank you. I'll go through these a little quicker. Sorry. SDI is what we call specially designed instruction, and you may hear that acronym thrown out a lot too. And that really is that special instruction that your child's going to get that's going to be different and individualized for your child's needs. It is specially designed just for them. And it's provided at no cost. There should be no charge to you at all to receive that instruction. And that just shows you the definition of what that is. I'm not going to read that to you. That comes from our law in Iowa of what that means, specially designed instruction. I'm going to skip the videos, and if we have time at the end, I'll show you a couple videos of examples of what that might look like. Support services are something else that your IEP team will talk about. So some examples would be speech and language, occupational therapy, physical therapy, paraprofessional support. So some children need an additional adult who is just going to help your child with certain things. It can be anywhere from just we just need an additional adult because we have these 3 children who need additional supervision, all the way up to my child needs someone with them 24/7 just for them. We call that a one-on-one. So there's different varying types of paraprofessional support depending on what your child needs. No, nope, you're fine. Okay. Mm-hmm. Consultation. Mm-hmm. It is, nope, and a feeding need is something that they could be addressing, and we can talk to you more about that because that's a pretty individual question. Yeah. That feeding support is something that can be provided in the school setting. And what that support looks like also has kind of a continuum. So the speech person may come and work directly with your child one-on-one, pull them out over here, we're going to do some work together 30 minutes a week, all the way to, you know what, I don't really need to work with your child, but I'm just going to talk to the teacher, and I'm going to consult with the teacher regularly, give her ideas on how to work. So how the different support services look just depends on your child's needs, and that will be written right into the IEP. How often, what is it going to look like? But that's a good question. Sometimes they may not feel like they actually need direct OT services, but they still want to make sure and monitor and, you know, I don't want to completely come off the IEP yet, but I want to keep working with the teacher and making sure that, you know, the child's making progress, and then maybe later we have to add some, or maybe later I can come off the IEP and don't even need to be involved. So, yeah. And that's kind of that last bullet talks about what that services may look like. You'll also hear about things called accommodations. So accommodations are really supports provided to help your child access the preschool setting and the curriculum. And examples of that are visual cues or visual schedules. Seating arrangements, maybe your child needs to be up close if there's a visual impairment, that it will be written into the IEP that this child needs to have preferential seating right up by the teacher so that they can see. It may be sensory items. If they have some sensory processing issues or things like that, that's written into the IEP that they need different sensory objects to hold or need sensory break times, things like that. Extended wait time, prompting is a big one. Hand over hand. Maybe the child needs a lot of hand over hand support to be able to complete and follow directions. So those are some examples of what accommodations may be. And here are just a couple of examples of what they look like. So this would be like a visual schedule or visual cues. The one on the left is an object. They actually use objects to show the child the sequence of their day. It may be breaking down a task. So if your child's learning how to brush their teeth, they do a visual schedule of how the different steps are. The one on the right is more of when you come home from school, here's what a visual schedule would look like. They may do something similar to that in the classroom, okay? So those are the types of accommodations that might be written into the IEP. Here's some more. Visual timers are used a lot. A first then schedule. Some children are still learning about how to get rewards or to be reinforced. You do this first, and then you get to play with the toy that you want to play with. So we call that a first then schedule. And then the one on the right are just visual cues, so that they can non-verbally give cues to a child. Okay, now it's quiet time, or now it's time to line up. Some children orally have a hard time following directions. The visual helps them understand the expectation. And then assistive technology is another piece that will be in the IEP. If you have a child who is nonverbal, we need to give them a way to communicate. That may be pictures. It may be an actual device that does voice output. Or it could be a wheelchair or walker too, are also assistive devices. So these are some examples of those especially for communication. A PEX system, if you've heard that, it's a picture exchange communication system, where the child actually learns, if they want to, for example, request a cookie, they learn how to take the picture of the cookie and give it to you in exchange for the cookie. It's the beginning stages of learning how to communicate orally. They do it with a visual first. And it's something that the teachers are learning how to do when they're getting their special education license. The switches is another one where they push a switch to communicate. And then you can go all the way up to like an iPad type device. With iPads now, I mean, you can download a million different apps that will help you learn how to communicate. So these are things that if your child needs this, will be written into the IEP so you can make sure they're going to get it. Okay, anyone have any questions? Do you want to see a couple of videos of preschool in action? Yeah? Okay. I'll have to do it.
With children with any kind of gross motor delay, it makes a lot of sense to do their physical therapy intervention right on the playground. Here we're seeing a child with some balance and strength deficits, and he's just beginning to be able to participate more in some of the peer activities. One of the roles that I have at the center is to come up with different adaptations which allow the children to be more successful in the same activities as their classmates. Here you can see with just some simple adaptations to this tricycle that Josh is able to have a good experience with his peers. One of the things that I like about the playground is that there's always a large number of children out there with me, and it's usually very easy to get at least one peer, if not a group of peers, participating in the activity, both just in a social way or modeling for the child. I mean, it's not something we set up, but they'll just be doing the same activity, and it does provide a great model. But also, as you see, sometimes we have children be little helpers too. Josh has already learned how to pedal. He's a little bit rusty in this tape because we're just getting back from winter vacation. But his pedaling has been going really well, but he's having trouble initiating the pedaling. So that's what we're working on in this segment, how to get the trike going from a standstill. There he finally gets going. And so I'm looking for some children to play a little red light, green light game. And Nick, who is in the first little part of this segment, comes along and participates with us.
Okay, stop and go. Okay, when I say red light, green light, go. Hey! Where are you? Pedal, 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 pedal. Good job, good job. Oh, good job. And red light, stop. Oh, no. Uh-oh, that's good. I was almost going to give you a ticket. Okay, you ready to go? So we're going to go. That's right. Back up and push hard with that foot and go.